First portion of our reading will be Hebrews chapter 11, verses 1 through 3. Now faith is the assurance of things hoped for, the conviction of things not seen. Indeed, by faith our ancestors received approval. By faith we understand that the worlds were prepared by the word of God, so that what is seen was made from things that are not visible. And then Hebrews chapter 11, verses 8 through 16. By faith, Abraham obeyed when he was called to set forth for a place that he was going to receive as an inheritance. He set out, not knowing where he was going. By faith, he stayed for a time in the land he had been promised, as in a foreign land, living in tents, as did Isaac and Jacob, who were heirs with him of the same promise. For he looked forward to the city that has foundations, whose architect and builder is God. By faith he received power of procreation, even though he was too old, and Sarah herself was barren, because he considered him faithful who had promised. Therefore, from one person, this is one as good as dead, descendants were born, as many as the stars of heaven and as the innumerable grains of sand by the seashore. All of these died in faith without having received the promises, but from a distance they saw and greeted them. They confessed that they were strangers and foreigners on earth, for people who speak in this way make it clear that they are seeking a homeland. If they had been thinking of the land that they had left behind, they would have had opportunity to return. But as it is, they desire a better country, that is, a heavenly one. Therefore, God is not ashamed to be called their God. Indeed, he has prepared a city for them.
So let us pray together. God of hope, by faith we know that you created the world, and that what is seen is made by things that are not visible. Open our eyes to your presence among us, that we may hear your word with clarity and assurance of hope, as we follow you in all righteousness. Through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen. Well, this reading from the book of Hebrews, chapter 11, is the beginning of 3 chapters, all talking about the nature of faith, and that we're going to look at them in the next 3 weeks series. In this 3-week series. And it follows on from a passage reminding the Hebrews of the once-for-all nature of Jesus' sacrifice. Well, the letter to the Hebrews was written 30 to 50 years after Jesus' death by an unnamed Christian leader to a community made up of both Gentile and Jewish converts. And it was a letter of encouragement for one another. And one of the commentaries I was reading said that at this time, Christians were largely considered to be a subversive group. Like any scapegoated community, they had become subject to hostility, insults and abuse from members of the dominant privileged culture. They'd suffered many hardships, loss of respect, job insecurity and financial injury. Some had even been arrested and imprisoned by those who sought to reform these non-compliant citizens. Those who couldn't cope with the oppression had withdrawn from membership. Others wondered whether it was worth it to continue to be followers of Christ. But there were some who'd remained steadfast and committed to the path that God had chosen them to travel. As I read that description, it sounded not so unlike Christianity in America today, where our churches continue to decline and fear and hostility pervade our nation's culture. So our scripture today began with those iconic words. Faith is the assurance of things hoped for, the conviction of things not seen. And that's the New Revised Standard Version. But it's variously translated as faith is the reality of what we hope for, the proof of what we don't see. Common English Bible. Or faith is the confidence in what we hope for, and the assurance about what we don't see. New International Version. And faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. King James Version and the New King James Version. Well, there's two dimensions to this faith statement that I'm hearing. First, faith provides a guarantee, a ground to which we can hold fast. But that grounding then orients us towards the future. The second dimension of faith is that it gives us courage to move forward, launching out into the unknown. So we need both dimensions of faithfulness. We need to hold fast to the promises of God and to move forward into the future, which is God's. As we walk by faith, trusting in what God has done before, we move into the future and experience God with us there, so that we have the courage to keep going forward, where we will meet God again. In other words, we learn by doing. Our experience of faith affects the future. By walking in faith, we become people of faith. Well, next our letter goes on to give us some concrete examples. The passage continues with a long litany of heroes who've embodied faith even in the face of disappointment. These are our faith fathers, described in the first two books of the Bible, in Genesis and Exodus. And we skipped over the few verses that said, by faith, Abel did these things. By faith, Enoch did some things. By faith, Noah. And then we read, by faith, Abraham, with references to Sarah and Isaac and Jacob. And if we'd continued reading, we'd have heard, by faith, Joseph did some things. And next week, we'll read the bit that says, by faith, Moses. These clouds of witnesses, or the saints who've gone before us, affect us, and their stories bring us encouragement. Each of our heroes held the conviction that God will prevail in the end. And that led them to continuing on in the face of difficulties. In other words, we can say to ourselves, today I'm in this bad place, or today our community is in this bad place, or today our nation is in this bad place. And then we can say, someday I or we will get out. And we can ask ourselves, so how should we act? How should I act today? The faith of Abraham and the many other exemplars of faith is presented as a continued commitment to seeking after something they couldn't see. Faith isn't a heroic, once-for-all decision. It's an ongoing commitment. Faith isn't just belief. It's something that happens in the world, in the real world of our actual lives. And faithful living pursues the promises of God consistently over a lifetime. We're faithful when we keep moving in the direction of a promise, something that we can't see or even necessarily fully realize, but that keeps moving us forward and calling us on. We keep putting one foot in front of the other. And we let those who've gone before us encourage us. And we encourage others by pointing out to them the saints that they can look up to. So today, behind us, behind our altar, is that beautiful banner that you called Faces of Faith, made several years ago. And each of you who were part of the congregation at that time had the outline, the shadow of your face traced. And someone cut out all those faces made in the different fabrics. And we even have Nifty, Fred's dog, on the banner over here if you haven't seen it. You are each other's heroes. You're the ones who can offer each other encouragement. It's not just the faith stories of those who lived long ago who can encourage us. It's the faith stories of each of you. 2 weeks ago, on our 5th Sunday, when I was on vacation, Linda shared about the importance of the walk to Emmaus in her life and how it totally changed things for her. And after the service that day, Bonnie Lee talked about her faith journey and how she ended up ministering to prisoners in the jail, and now as a police chaplain. We can't always fix each other's problems, but we can encourage each other. We can look back on times in our own lives when we stepped out in faith, not knowing what was going to happen. And yet looking back on it now, we go, wow. And we can share those stories with others. When I was first at seminary, I found that the first year was the hardest year, when they disassemble your faith and have you questioning anything and everything that you have ever believed. There was many a time when I wondered how on earth I would get through that first year, and times when I felt like quitting. What would the future look like? I was happy with things ticking along as they were, but now I was being exposed to so much new scholarship, people whose opinions were so different to mine, and social justice issues that I could no longer ignore. Could I grow and change? Was that really what God was calling me to do? And as I got to know the students in the years above me, and saw the things that they were stepping out in faith and doing, how they were growing in confidence, where they were advocating for social change, I began to be inspired by them. They would offer encouragement to the first year students. They would tell us their stories of spiritual transformation. And the unknown future began to beckon me onwards as I listened and observed them. Abraham set out from Ur and entered Canaan and lived in a nomadic life in a tent, not knowing what the future would hold, yet holding on to God's promise of a better future. And he ended up with a son by Sarah and descendants too numerous to name. Well, with the 2016 Olympics in Rio, I was reminded this week as to how far we have come as a country. From turning African Americans away from white-only swimming pools, to having an African American woman, Simone Magnon, win a gold medal. Activist and journalist George Johnson sent out a tweet drawing a correlation between two history-making young black trailblazers shortly after Simone took home the gold on Thursday night. His tweet said, "Never forget, they drained an entire swimming pool because Dorothy Dandridge stuck her toe in it. That's why Simone Magnon is important." There are still less pools in African American neighborhoods, and if your parents can't swim, then there's less chance that the children will learn. Today, USA Swimming says that there's an estimated 70% of African American children who don't learn to swim. And in 2014, according to the Center for Disease Control, black children and teenagers were still drowning in swimming pools at a rate greater than 5 times that of white children and teens. Simone, in an interview afterwards, lifted up the saints who had gone before her, saying, "This medal isn't just for me, it's for the African Americans who've come before me and been an inspiration." She especially mentioned Maritza Correa, who in 2004 made history as the first black woman to earn a place on the US Olympic swim team and won a silver medal in the 400-meter freestyle relay. Manuel added, "I hope I can be an inspiration to others, so this medal is for those who come behind me and get into the sport, and hopefully find the love and drive to get to this point." She said the medal is also for those who believe they can't do it, being a black swimmer. What a wonderful encourager she is, and she will be for others. Justice will prevail in the end. God's will prevail. You know, when I was looking for a graphic for this sermon series, as I was thinking about the theme of encouraging each other, I was Googling some alternate words like building each other up. And this picture of rocks piled up on top of one another spoke to me. It's amazing what we can build or do when we walk by faith and encourage one another. We can build one another up to be balanced towers of strength instead of standing by or building walls. Have you ever gone hiking or to the beach and seen that someone has left behind some piled up rocks like this? It's become a fairly popular thing to do. Some artists, though, create what are being called stone balancing sculptures. And the really gifted ones balance stones in some gravity-defying ways. They're so beautiful and paradoxical. Faith is the assurance of things hoped for, the conviction of things not seen. A lesson in paradox. By walking in faith, we become people of faith, even when the ground is rocky and uneven. May the saints who have gone before us inspire us to move forward. May we always build each other up and encourage each other in our individual and our collective faith journeys, with Jesus as our ultimate encourager. Thanks be to God. Amen. Let us pray together. Holy One, teach us to look for those in our midst who are in a bad place for one reason or another. Show us ways to offer those who are suffering encouragement that builds them up. May we be saints to each other. Fill us with the conviction that you will prevail in the end. Keep us walking by faith, putting one foot in front of the other. Increase our faith and amplify our hope, that by the power of your Spirit we might serve you well and be ready to greet you when Christ comes in glory.